This is Gemara Baba Kama Daf Pei Ches, and we're holding on the bottom of Pei Zayin Amid Beis. We are 4 lines from the bottom of the Amid. The last 3 words on the line are Mai Skula. As we learned in the previous top of the Amid, that if one damages his son, said the Mishnah, you have to put the money in a skula, in a trust. Says the Gemara now, what exactly does this mean? Mai segula. Rav Chisda Amar Sefer Torah, Rabbi Ravuna Amar Dikla. Amachleikes Rabbi Ravuna and Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda says, should purchase a Sefer Torah, which the child is going to learn from. Of course, let's remind ourselves, Zman Chazal, there was no printing press, therefore all Sfarim, all learning was from the Torah itself. Rabbi Ravuna says, the Dikla, you purchase a palm tree for the child, Ha'achal minei tamra, and the kid will have that which to eat from the child. Continues the Gemara, reverting back to our discussion from yesterday, which is the damages of a child, which is a kitana. V'chein Reish Lakish. And so says Reish Lakish, Loizoscha Torah la'av ela shevach neurim bilvad. The Torah only gave the father, he gains from his daughter the shevach neurim. However, he will not receive the payments for damages. Rav Yochanan Amar teaches Rav Yochanan, no, afilu psia, the father gets compensation even for a psia, even for a wound. Says the Gemara, psia zagadai doch. Afilu Rav Elazar la komi bailei ella chavala. Even Rav Elazar, where this whole discussion came from, only was discussing a chavala, a more intense type of damaging, a more intense type of wound. Why? What's the reason as we turn over to Peichas Amid Aleph? The reason being Dav Chasa Mikisba, because a more intense wound lessens her value, as the Tab Rashi points out. Therefore, the father is going to get it. Why? Because it's in his power L'meichra, to sell her. However, Avol Psia Delo Pascha Mikasba, but a small wound which isn't going to decrease her value at all, Loi Kami Bayile, there was no Shaila. Explains the Gemara Amar Rav Yossi Bar Chanina Shepatza Bifanea Vavchasa Mikasba. The case is and where the child got wounded on her face, which thereby lowered her value, which is actually a very interesting maramakim over here, that we see that damages to the face are more vital as different reasons. One of the reasons being in Isha Elaliyofi, and sorry about that, and if her face is damaged, obviously the beauty is as well compromised. Continues the Gemara 4 lines down, quoting the next part of the Mishnah, if someone damages the Eved Kenani of someone else, the halacha is he is chayiv for all chamisha dvarim. Rav Yehuda and the Mishnah argued, and Rav Yehuda said there's no payment for busha of an Eved. Says the Gemara, Mai taima de Rav Yehuda. What is the reason of Rav Yehuda's no busha by an Eved? Amar Kra explains the Gemara. The pasuk says, Ki nashu yinatsu anashim yachtav. When men go out to fight, ish va'achav, a man and his brother, b'mi sheish layachua. From here we darshan, and this is of course the makar for the payment of baishes. Says the Gemara, so it will only be someone that has a brother, yatsa eved, and eved, a slave is excluded. She'ein lo yachua, as there's no din, does not have any brothers. For Rabbanan, and the Rabbanan who say that there is such a payment, echavu b'mitzvah, echadhu, echavu b'mitzvahs. It's not true. Certain halachas, we know that an Eved Kenani has the din of an Isha with regarding mitzvahs. He has to keep the all non-time-bound mitzvahs. It says the Gemara, he is at some level considered an echav, a brother with regard to those mitzvahs. Continues the Gemara, Elameata. Based on what we're saying right now, the Rav Yehuda, Zaymimei Eved, Lo Yeharguha. If there's a case of Eidim Zaymimim that are testifying against an Eved, Lo Yeharguha. Those Eidim Zaymimim should not be Chayim Misa. Why? It says in the Torah, you do to the Eidim, the basic premise of all Eidim Zaymim, which we've seen many times, is you do to the Eidim that which they try to do to someone else. And therefore, since in this case, that the Eved is not considered your brother, look at Rashi in the last line, Alma Kimlan, the Eved ki Yisrael inyan misas bezdin. Detinan v'sechas makas v'Yisrael like Eved goyla al yidei Eved. But the Gemara is concerned that if he's not considered achuyah, that Eidim Zaymim should not ever be chayiv and misa for such a scenario. Amar Rava explains Rava Amar Rav Shishes Amar Kra ubi arta hara mikir becha mikol makin. The pasuk says, "Get rid of all evil from your midst," and therefore this teaches us that there's a din of the Eidim Zaymim getting the punishment in all situations, even when the eidos is about someone who's not necessarily a chuya. It's not a brother, but still the din of Eidim Zaymun would apply nonetheless. So says the Gemara, Elameata, moving back along, L'Rabbanan Eved Yekasher L'Malchus. According to the Rabbanan, that an Eved has a din of achuya. Why? Because some mitzvahs, the Eved is like your brother. Asked the Gemara, the Eved should be kosher lemalchus. Why? Because the intrinsic quality of a melech has to be, it's an ach, it's keilu a brother. But of course we know that an Eved cannot be a melech. Explains the Gemara, Amri, they responded, the Rabbanu l'taimech. According to you, tikshlach ger, we should ask about a ger. L'divrei hakol, we should ask about a ger, because everyone holds that a ger is a din of a brother. And yet, what's the halacha? And yet the halacha is that a ger can't be a melech. Elamar cross. So rather, what are we going to have to answer? Mikerev achicha. And from there, we're going to have to learn that a melech has a higher level of qualification. Mimuvchar shebe achicha. It has to be the choicest. It has to be the greatest. And therefore, that is what will exclude a ger. That is what will exclude an eved as well. Continues the Gemara about 12 lines down. The first one line is Ella Me'ata. Based on that which we're saying, ask the Gemara l'Rabbanan. Yeh Eved kosher le'idos. According to the Rabbanan, an Eved should be kosher le'idos. T'chsev, as the Torah says, V'hine eid sheker ha'eid. V'hine eid sheker anabachiv. The pasuk says that if we have an eid sheker, he's testifying falsely against his achiv, his brother. So according to the Rabbanan, the Eved has a din of a brother, he should be able to be kosher leidos. Amar ula idos loimatis amrit. No, there's no way that an Eved could be an 8. Asya idos bekal v'chaymer meisha. Uma isha shira uyalava bekal. A woman certainly is part of Klal Yisrael, and yet, what is the halacha? It's b'sula leidos. Eved in real level kal in a din certainly kal v'chaymer shapasa leidos. So says the Gemara, good kasha, but lemaisa, just like a woman is going to be excluded from eidos, the same thing will apply about an Eved. Ask the Gemara 1 second, your kal v'chaymer is faulty. But an Eved which is Raya Lamila, so maybe that will allow the Eved to be a kosher aid. Answers the Gemara, why? And yet a child is pasal eidos. Ask Gemara further 1 second. Malakata sheina b'mitzvahs. Kata doesn't have any chiyuv mitzvahs. Obviously chinuch, but not proper chiyuvim. Timer be'eved shu b'mitzvahs. What about an Eved which is indeed included in the mitzvahs, like we said before, like a woman, all non-time bound mitzvahs? Answers the Gemara, Isha dechiach. No, a woman proves sheyeshta b'mitzvahs psula veidos. And the classical v'chazer adin, it goes around and around. Lo rizek rizeh. So we're going to learn now for both the combination of Eved and, Katan and Isha, that they're both excluded from being an aid. Lo rizek rizeh sadashaveh shebehen of the Katan and the Isha, which is watched in Einon bechol ha-mitzvahs. And they are psul mahayid afani obvious Eved. So too, we're going to learn about an Eved she'einon bechol ha-mitzvahs upasal lahayid. So the makar that an Eved cannot be an aid is learned out from the combination of an Isha and a Katan. Ask the Gemara 1 second. Malat Sarashava Shabem Yir Sarashava is faulty. Shein Einay Be'ish. The Sarashava are both of them a Katan and an Isha. Neither of them is an Ish. Timer Be'eved Shehu Be'ish. Says the Gemara Latesi Mi Gazlan. You're right. Let's learn out from Gazlan. Mala Gazlan Shekein Maisav Garmulai. Says the Gemara 1 second. But a Gazlan, the reason why he's Pasal Eidus is because his actions cause him to lose his status that he's able to be a kosher aid. Timer Be'eved Shein Maisav Garmulai. Says, you're right, Al Tesi Mi Gazlan Umechad Mehanoch. So we have to learn out from Gazlan in combination with either an Eved or an Isha, and the combination of a Gazlan and one of those two will be the Mamatzinu, will be the Gzeir Shava, to allow us to learn that an Eved is Pater, an Eved is not allowed to be an aid. Says the Gemara, that source number 1, that an Eved cannot be an aid. Continues the Gemara about 10 lines from the medium-sized lines. Mar Breid Ravina Amar Kra. He is a different source that an Eved is Pasal Leida. Says the Torah, Lo Yumasu Avos Al Banim, Lo Yumasu Al Pi Avos. That children should not die for fathers. Lo Yumasu, they should not be nifter through the mouth of the father. Shein Lem Chayiv. Shein Lahem. Excuse me. One more time. There's no relationship between the father and the child. If you're going to tell me, if you're going to tell me like you suggested, which is what? That it's about the edus of the child. My banim. Why does the Torah say a funny way of saying banim? Not their children, as we would be talking about the relationship between the father and son, but rather just banim. Shema mina adlo yamasu al pi avos. What do we learn out from here? That the child should not be put to death through that which their father did. She'in lahem chayim banim. That there's no relationship between the father and the son. What is this case of the no relationship to the father and the son? That is the case of the Eved. Another Makar showing us that the Eved will be Pasal Le'idos. Ask the Gemara 4 lines from the medium-sized lines. Elameata. Ubanim le'yamasu alav v'izachinami. Le'yamusu al pi banim. 1 second, the pasuk still doesn't make any sense. The pasuk should still le'yamasu al pi banim she'in lem chayim chayis avos. Ela ger hachanami, the Pasal Eidos. Says the Gemara 1 second. So it's going to refer to a ger, but the problem is, but a ger is also Pasal Eidos. So how do we know the din about and what's the question? The question is, it's not true. The question is that a ger is lamaisa, yes, kasher leidus, but from this pasuk it would seem to indicate that the ger is basal. Amri hachiyashta ger nehidin lechayis lamalo lamati ish lechayis. It's true that the ger is cut off from above. He's not related to his parents. However, if the ger has a child, then yes, there is chayis lamata, there is a relationship to his children, which this comes along, la fuke eved, this excludes a slave in the chayis lamala, v'loy lamata, the slave has no relationship to either its parents or to a child born while in servitude. Says the Gemara, you know how I know this? These al on the first medium-sized line, ger pasal eidos, If indeed it would be teaching me that a ger is basel eidos, then lech rachman leimasu avos al bneihem lechdam maran leimasu beeidos banim lech rachman banim leimasu al avos tishmas min atarti chad leimasu banim beeidos avos veedach leimasu al pi banim shenem chias. Says the Gemara, the Torah did not have to say that way. You know why? Because we could learn out an Eved from the Kal V'Chomer from Ger. What's the Kal V'Chomer in the second white line? As we could all anticipate that a Ger, only as we just explained, doesn't have a relationship to his parent above him. But has a relationship to a child, and yet Pasal Eidos. Ella, that's what you would have thought. From here we learn out that what? Who the basal eidos? That is din of psol eidos is a din dafka by the Eved, as there's no relationship both up and down to parent or child. Aval ger kivan dieshlo chayis lemata kosher leida, says the Gemara lemaisa. The ger is yes kosher leidos, and the Eved is not. The Torah should have flipped around the pasuk. Lamali because achman banim leimusu al avois. The mashal leimusu al pi banim shein lo chayis avois. I did because leimusu avos al banim because nami banim leimusu al avois. Says the Gemara, the classical parallelism, and therefore we can't learn out from there. So in Lamaisa we have two mekayres, and an Eved cannot be a aid, but a ger could, yes, indeed, be an aid. And we continue 2 lines from the bottom. On Pechasam Rale Chayre Shaita Vekatan Pigasan Ra. Said the Mishnah, bumping into Chayre Shaita Vekatan is bad. Why? You damage them, you're a Chayiv. They damage you, they are Potter. Ema de Rav Shmuel Bar Abba Mar Grunya having a similar Leila Rav Abba. He's getting married to Rav Abba. Kasavtinhu l'nechsei l'Rav Shmuel bar Abba. She wrote over her possessions to Shmuel bar Abba, Bra, her son, Basar d'Shchiva, and after she was Nifteres, turning over to Ayin Ches Amid Beis, Azal Rav Shmuel bar Abba Kamed Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Kmeil b'nechsei, and he established the property as belonging to him. Also Rav Abba Amr l'Milsa Kamed Rav Haishia. Also Rav Haishi Amar Kamed Rav Yehuda, a whole chain of events over here, as the story, as the Psak Halacha transfers from hand to hand. And where did this story settle? Amar Lei, 4 lines down, Bechasam Beis, Hachi Amar Shmuel, this is what Shmuel says, Ha'isha Shemacha b'nechsei malug b'chai bailo u'meisa abal, Maitzi miyad al-kuchais, the woman is indeed able to take it away from the kuchais, and therefore Reb Abba can stop Rav Shmuel bar Abba from taking these properties. And the story continues that Amru Kamed Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Lei, no, namastita yadano. He said, I know a Mishnah that could prove not like Shmuel. The Tanana Koisev Nechasav Lemroi, if someone writes over his properties to his son Lacher Moisai, Ben Eino Yachal Limkar, the child cannot sell those properties. Why? Mibnei Shehein Bershus Av, because the properties are not considered to be in the child's rishus, they're in the father's rishus. But in a similar vein, the father can't sell the properties. Why? Because they're written over to the child. Macharav, if the father does sell it, obviously illegally, mechurin, it's considered a sale ad sheyamas until he dies. Whereas macharav ben ilo lekoich ad sheyamas av, and the purchaser gets nothing until the father dies. Kimais av, then mia islay liloikeach. When the father dies, then yes, indeed, the lokeach will get the land. V'avagav the meisa ben b'chayi av. Why? Because it never came to the possession of the child. Rav Shimon ben Lakish, the Amars of Shimon Lakish has taught us, Loishanu Meisa ben V'chayav, to us Liyadi de Ben. If the child dies the lifetime of the father, that the property never came to the child, like Shana Meisav Chaya Ben, the Asli De Ben. In both of these cases, teaches Reish Lakish, Kana Keach. Why? De Itmar, as we learned in a Mishnah, Machar Ben B'Chayav Umeis Ben B'Chaya Umeis Haben b'chayav. What's halacha? Rav Yechon Amar loy kana loy keach. Rish Lakish Amar kana loy keach. That is the machlokes of Yechon and Rish Lakish. Rav Yechon Amar loy kana loy keach. Why? Amar l'char Yechon respond kiktan masis and machar haben loy kana loy keach ad shiamasav ve'bat v'chim ha'yisav v'slo loy keach. Deloy meisa ben b'chayav, because the child was not iftar in the father's lifetime. Tasali the aben, it came, then that would have allowed it to come to the possession of the child. Avol meisa ben b'chayav, tasali the ben, then and only afterwards kimayis av nami less elokeach. Says the Gemara, why? Where does this din come from? Alma, we see from here, kasavar. Says the Gemara, we see Alma kasavar kinyan peiros ki kinyan agof dami. Suggests the Gemara, we see that owning the peiros must be the same as owning the body of the land itself. Chizavin lavdi deizavin, and therefore that which we sold, he was not selling his own item. That's Rav Yochanan. Rishim Lakish Amar Kana Loikeach. Why? Kikitan Masis Machar Ben Ein Loikeach Ad Shiyamas But Kimaisa Mia Isle Loikeach Loishanu Lomisa Ben Chayav. Tosladea Ben, that it came to the hands of the son. V'loi Shanamisa Ben Chayav. Tosladea Ben, in both scenarios, whether it came or did not come to the hands of the child. Kana Loikeach. So says Gemara again. Alma, what do we see? The opinion of Reish Lakish is not like Rav Yochanan. Kasavar Kinin Peiros is Lav Kinin Agof Dami, and therefore Chizam Didei Kazavin. So says the Gemara, really at the crux of the machlekes Reish Lakish and Rav Yochanan is whether the Kinin Peiros is Kinin Hagof. Vanan Hashta Bein Rav Yirmiyah Barab. Bein Rav Yehuda Rav Shimon ben Lakish Svir Lahu. V'kam Rav Yirmiyah Barabba. Is al gedet kin beers kina gov dami ki ma'isa ma'isa ben b'chayav may isle lokeach. Why does a person get anything? Ki gozavin halavdi de gozavin elo lav shmami no kinyan peiros is lav ki kinyan hagof dami, and that is the reason why Rav Abbas was not able to stop the property to go to Rav Shmuel bar Abba. I didn't like Rav Yehuda. The story's not over. They brought this machlekes to Rav Yehuda. Amar Lahu said Rav Yehuda Hachi Amar Shmuel Zuin Adem L'Mishasenu. Rav Yehuda quoted Shmuel's explaining that this case of the wife giving away the property is not the same as our Mishnah. My time in the first white line, Amar Rav Yosef Bishlama. Note the reason is, says Rav Yosef Bishlama, Itane Ibchai because the Chasal Aviv. Ikla Mishva Mina, the Kini Beis Lav Kigan of Dami. The opposite, not that he wrote to the father, he wrote to the son. The reason why he must be writing it over to him is because the child is the inheritor, and that's the reason why the father felt the right and the need to write it over to the kid. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? It's a two-way street. You're telling me the son inherits the father, but the father doesn't inherit the son. Ella, rather, what must be going on over here? That what's going on over here, that if we would have said the case in the reverse, you would have thought that the son was trying to get the possessions away from his own son. Therefore, not the fact that the father wanted to give it to him. I'll say so too in this case. So says the Gemara, that's the reason why the cases are not the same. We conclude, so then what does it mean that it's not the same as the Mishnah? For a different reason, as Rav Yossi Chanina has taught us halacha that we've seen already. A special takana that they made in Usha. And that's the reason why in this whole Amud, this whole incredible story that started at the top of the Amud, this is the reason why Rav Abba was not able to disallow the gift to go to Rav Shmuel bar Abba. We'll stop over here. We'll pick it up from the bottom of Idi bar Abba in the next year. Siyata Dishmaya.